I bet you're at home right now. I bet you're at home because most of the world has been sent home. During the pandemic, a lot of people were told, go home and stay home. A lot of people over time resigned from their jobs. A lot of other people quit their jobs. And a lot of people, maybe you, are wondering what kind of job can you do from home? Now, everybody and his brother will sell you some sort of course or method or product or program so that you can make money from home. But a whole lot of those people are misleading you. Now, what I want to do is help you. I'm Dr. Joe Vitale, and this is the online TV show called Zero Limits Living. And what I do every week is bring you information and inspiration to help elevate you, to help you break free from whatever the limits are or perceived limits that you might be going through. In this particular show, we're going to do something I haven't done yet. We're going to reveal some of the inside secrets of making money online. Now, I was one of the pioneers online way back around 1995 or so. I was on the internet before it was called the internet. They were called bulletin board systems, and there were people with big computers and a lot of phone lines. And over time, that expanded. Over time, that became known as the internet. And over time, a lot of people like me clumsily tried to make money online. In fact, NASA invited me to go to their headquarters when I was living in Houston. And when I went there, they gave me a tour of the internet. And I thought it was a joke. I went in a big room and there was a big computer and there was a picture of planet Earth. And they said, we're looking at planet Earth from the internet. And because of the internet, we can tell what the weather is anywhere on the planet. And I almost burst into laughter thinking, how does this help anybody? We still don't know the weather today in the next century. If I want to know if it's raining, I look out the window. So way back in the 1990s, when NASA was introducing me to the internet, I wrote a famous column for a magazine, a business magazine, and I said, you cannot make money online. Well, I've proved myself wrong. And so has a whole lot of other people. And what we want to do on today's episode of Zero Limits Living is teach you, at least get you thinking and take the limits away from the possibility that you could make money online yourself. Now, to help me do that, I have a legend. I have a man who has been online marketing since around 1990. I wrote it down, 1997. He sold over 700,000 products online. This guy is humorous, eccentric, creative, persistent. He's legendary. He's been known as the OG of internet marketing, and I had to look up OG. Thank goodness for Google. OG seems to be the original gangster. It could mean something else, but that's what we're going with for now. My guest today is not only a genius and a friend, and he's in my secret mastermind. We haven't been meeting physically, but he's in it mentally and spiritually. His best client was worth $600 million. And that client established his success and said it came from reading Think and Grow Rich, the famous book by Napoleon Hill, and by a mastermind he was in. Now, my guest today is Marlon Sanders. Marlon Sanders, and he says he loves marketing, the law of attraction, and Think and Grow Rich. And before I bring him on, I want you to know something. The thing I remember most about Marlon, way back in those early days in the last century, when we were all stumbling around on the internet trying to make money online, he was one of the first to sell something that I bought. And he was online, and there was a big guarantee. If you know anything about business, you should always have a guarantee. In fact, legally, you're required to have one. But how long it is and what it says is up to you. He had a guarantee that said, if you don't like my product, I will kiss this elephant's behind. And there was a huge photo of the butt of an elephant with Marlon Sanders standing behind him. I never forgot it. I thought, who is this man? And who would kiss an elephant's behind to prove the value of their product? I'm laughing because one of the most joyful people I've ever met, who I get to call as a friend and a peer and associate, is Marlon Sanders. And Marlon, thank you for coming on today.
Hey, Joe, thanks for having me on. I have to tell you, one day the phone rang, picked it up. This is Marlon. Yeah, Marlon, I want you to send me a picture of you kissing that elephant's behind. And I said, sir, I'll give you the money back. I'll give you extra bonuses, right? I don't care. I want to see the picture. So I literally had to go down to a local circus and try to, that had an elephant. And I'm sitting there trying to like arrange my head and the elephant's behind to get the pic. Finally, I got a picture and we sent it to the
Well, today you can easily do it by downloading a picture from Google and then doing Photoshop of one sort or another. We can all kiss the elephant's behind now.
I know, right? Hey, I got to tell you, first of all, I sold 70,000 products personally, but if you were to look at my customers and everything, it would, friends, customers, people that have used my marketing systems and ideas, it certainly exceeds 700,000. I have to say, Joe, when I got started in this business, way back, I'd read a Get Rich Quick book. And then I read Think and Grow Rich. Think and Grow Rich, as you know, says write out your goals, write out the deadline for their accomplishment, visualize accomplishing them daily as you teach. And I took a big piece of cardboard. I wrote out the goals. I wanted to travel. I wanted to speak. I wanted to do consulting. I wanted to write books and so forth. I visualized that just like Napoleon Hill said, right? Every single thing that I wrote on that piece of cardboard has happened today. And I think many people have experienced that. Have you found that to be your experience? You hear these stories all the time?
I hear the stories all the time, and it's a story from my own life as well. So let's start there, because what I want to do on this show, and thank you, you came on as a last-minute guest. You're always there to say yes and to help people in a pinch. So thank you for helping me and everybody watching on the Zero Limits Living TV show. What I want to know is teach people right now, the ones that are watching this, how to do that. Yes, it's in Think and Grow Rich. Yes, Napoleon Hill was a genius. Yes, you've experienced this. I've experienced this. So many other people have experienced this. But how do they do it? What do they do first to create this card or this vision or this desire so they can be bragging about their manifestation later too?
You know, that's a great question, Joe, and it's such an awesome starting point, because Napoleon Hill said the starting point is definiteness of purpose, and second of all, desire. And it's interesting because if you ask people, well, what's your definite major purpose? They'll be like, my what? Right? Well, what do you just have this burning desire to do or to achieve? I mean, and this is people in business, right? And so it starts, as Napoleon Hill said, it's like chapter 1, definiteness of purpose. What is your purpose? And it's something you teach, that it transcends money. It goes in Zero Limits Living. It goes, what's your purpose? A lot of people miss that. And that's what Napoleon Hill said. And then after that, what do you have a burning desire for? I don't think you try to create this burning desire. It's like, what's already in you? What's this desire that you can then take through definiteness of purpose and magnify that? Once you have that, then there is magic, as I know you believe and teach, in writing down goals with a deadline, reading them daily, keeping them in your consciousness. But something I learned from you is this: when we had a mastermind and you had everybody verbally speak what they wanted. Now, a lot of people don't teach that. You don't hear that much, that you need to speak it to a mastermind, to people, because you don't want to tell people who aren't in harmony with your goals. But when you have that group of people that you can trust and you can speak out those goals, that's very powerful. There's something I really learned from you, Joe. And, you know, I know when people hear this, they think, oh yeah, I've heard the goal setting. I've heard that, you know, Napoleon Hill, secret, whatever. I heard that. But here's the thing I learned from you was, in this meeting, you were constant, when we would have our mastermind, you were constantly speaking out things that you would want. And these were big things. And it's like, you realize how small you're thinking, because when you would speak these things out, you come up with these things and you wouldn't know how you were going to accomplish them.
Exactly. Well, you're bringing up several things here. One is about the idea of what your definiteness of purpose is. I remember hearing Jeff Bezos of Amazon saying, you don't choose your passion, Your passion chooses you. And I loved it because when I reflected on it, it's like I could have done a whole lot of things in my life, but writing and books had a magic and a pull for me personally. And I think that's where people want to begin by looking is look inside yourself and find out what's pulling you, what is interesting you, what is your fascination, what are you mesmerized with, what would you want to do or have or experience if money wasn't involved and the idea of limits wasn't involved at all, that you can have, do, or be anything. And Marlon, you are exactly right. In the mastermind you and I have been in, I'm doing that stretching and encouraging for everybody, but mostly for me. I want to think bigger. And I want to quickly say, I've mentioned on a previous episode, there's a young man in Thailand who was homeless 15 years ago. Today, he's a billionaire, not a millionaire, multimillionaire. He's a billionaire. He says he credits it to me, even though I never met the guy until after he became a billionaire. And he credits it to the people in The Secret. And what he was doing was finding his purpose, finding his passion, writing down his goals, visualizing what he wanted. He went from homeless to billionaire. In fact, that's the title of the book I helped him write, Homeless to Billionaire. So what I'm wanting to pull out of you, I want you to help me help the people watching. You and I are both fans of Think and Grow Rich. We're both fans of Napoleon Hill. I actually have an autographed copy of Think and Grow Rich behind me. And I was just filmed for a movie about Think and Grow Rich that'll be coming out in 2022. And I want to know, these people that are watching right now, they may be completely new to this. How are they going to discover their purpose, let alone their passion? What kind of advice would you give, or how did you discover it for yourself?
So I'll tell you something interesting. Talking to a friend the other day, Joe, I know you run into this all the time. You got to understand, my friend has a superpower that he is the best in the world at, or nearly the best in the world. Certainly one of the best in the world, selling by telling stories. He is one of the very, very, very best in the world. He's known for it. I told him the other day, well, you know, your superpower is story selling. It's what we call it, story selling. And he's like, it is? I'm like, you're one of the very best in the world, maybe the best in the world at it. He's like, wow, well, I never thought of it that way. And so the point of this, Joe, is a lot of people don't know what their superpower is. Now, I'm not saying you're the best in the world. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't, but everyone has this God, this flame from God inside of them, these unique talents, these unique gifts. And I really think that it just starts with that. Like you identified early on, you loved writing. Yes. That's very powerful because you discovered your superpower early on. But, you know, in psychology, they call that conscious competence. A lot of people have unconscious competence. They're really great at it, but they're not aware of it. So to me, a lot of it starts with that. Do you see it that way, Joe?
I do. In fact, what I've noticed is most people don't recognize their superpower. Somebody else outside of them that's close to them that maybe is observing them points it out to them. And that's when, much like your friend, you're saying that they were a super storyteller, but they didn't really think of it that way. They didn't really realize it until somebody pointed it out. Now, this is one reason why I think all of us should be in a mastermind of one sort or another, or all of us should have a coach or a mentor of one sort or another. Reason being, we don't usually see our own strengths. We're very good at finding our own faults. We're very critical of ourselves. We're very negative of ourselves. And that's one reason that we keep ourselves pushed down. If we want to live a zero limits life, this whole show is called Zero Limits Living, we need to find our strength and start to put the fire or amplify it underneath that. So one way of finding it is to look at what you love to do, even if money wasn't involved. Another thing to do is look at what people are telling you. I met a man who had been a software engineer in Russia. He escaped from Russia. He was living in Canada when I met him, and he was now making guitars. And I said, how did you get into making guitars? You lived in Russia, which is not known for guitar making, and you were an engineer over there, and now you're in Canada, and suddenly you're making these beautiful acoustic guitars. And he said, somebody saw a construction he had made, which was not a guitar, and just said, you might consider building a guitar. You just might be good at it. And it was that seed. Now, the seed had to resonate with him. If somebody said that to me, I'd go, well, that's cool. I'm not going to build a guitar. I can't I bought a model of the Starship Enterprise in the 1960s. I never could put it together. Even today, 60,000 years later, I'm still embarrassed. I could not put the Enterprise together. It was a piece of freaking plastic. So I'm not going to build a guitar. But this guy had a seed planted. You might try building guitars. Now he's got a guitar line, and I actually have a couple of them. So I think that's another thing, is to pay attention to what people are telling you. You were one of the first in internet marketing. How did you discover that you might be good at it, or you might be good at copywriting, for example, which you ended up excelling at?
Well, it's a great question, Dr. Joe, and I'll tell you this. Sometimes you find your destiny, sometimes your destiny finds you, right? And it can work both ways. For me, 1978, I read a Get Rich Quick book called a business opportunity ad that said, Ohio man discover 7-step system to escape the great American rat race. And it told about how he traveled in this RV. I didn't have an RV. I'm like 18 years old. But he would travel in an RV with his family, and he'd fill out these papers. And then like $70,000 came in. I'm like, oh my goodness, I gotta learn how to fill out these papers, right?
Yeah.
And so I bought the book. Is by Benjamin Suarez, Canton, Ohio. Great book.
Oh, it's a legendary book. I know that book. Yes.
And he talked about this guy named Gary Halbert.
Yes.
Who helped him. And I was like, wow, Gary. And I just became so fascinated with, I was not a good writer at all. I mean, I think you had like writing ability. I don't know, Dr. Joe, but writing ability from the get-go. My letters didn't work for like 10 years. Like literally, I would write letters, keep sending them out, keep trying, running ads. I get just a little bitty, teeny, tiny response, right? And then through this and that, and the universe bringing the right resources at the right time, it all came together. But I just loved it. So I don't think I had it innate. Maybe I had innate talent that was like a rough diamond undiscovered. But I just loved it. Napoleon Hill talks about the power of persistence. He has a whole chapter on it, persistence. Yeah. When you find that flame inside, Og Mandino wrote, greatest salesman in the world. What did he say? One of the 10 things on the scrolls was, I will persist until I succeed.
I was on a radio show recently where they asked me, out of all the books you've written and all the books you've read and all the things you've done and all the things you've studied, what's the one thing that always works? And I was in the hot seat and I was surprised. It was like, one thing, I have to narrow it down to one thing. I've written 80 books. I mean, there's more than one thing. But then, because I was really wanting to answer the question for myself, I thought there is one thing. And this one thing beats talent. It beats luck. It beats connections. It beats fortune. It beats everything. And the one thing is what you just said, persistence. And what you just told us is that you kept trying. You sent out letters and nothing happened. You did your ads. You did whatever else was there. And you said for 10 years, 10 years. My first book was in 1984. My second one wasn't for 10 more years,
really?
Around 1980 or 1995.
I didn't know that it was that long.
Yes. It took a long time before the 1984 one. I went through homelessness. I went through poverty. I was struggling. I was going through dark years of the soul. But 1984, first book, 10 more years pass before the next book. And then slowly things start to click. But one of the reasons it clicked is that the internet was being discovered by people like you and me. And we were going online and we were stumbling around and we were trying things. And I remember I had one of the first ebooks that came out. And Mark Joyner was the guy who wanted to release it. And I kept telling him, ebooks will never sell. They're never got to do anything online. Everybody wants a printed book. So I was thinking to myself, I have printed books behind me. And I'm thinking, I don't want an invisible book. And finally, I gave him hypnotic writing to just shut him up. I said, go ahead and try this, knowing it would fail. My God, it struck gold overnight. And as you know, hypnotic writing became a legendary success and one of my first. What was your first success online? What do you remember your first one?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I had, first of all, the product I remember the most was not the success. It was the failure, because sometimes you learn from your failures. Not
That's
that you
an
have to have
important
those
lesson.
to learn,
That's
but
an
I learned
important
from
lesson.
it. It was called Speed Cash. I thought, oh my gosh, legendary title. I worked like 6 months recording it, because in those days you had these little mini DVD, CD discs, Sony little. It was like a nightmare to record it. It took me 6 months because I was traveling and speaking during the week at the time in 2 cities, and so I only had like a day to work on it. So it took me 6 months. I put the thing together, and I sold like 3 copies of it. So then I was like, okay, well, that didn't work so hot, and then Ben Suarez taught a 12 product survey. I'm like, well, maybe I should do this 12 product survey thing. So I did a 12 product survey. The next one sold a little bit better. I'm like, well, let me try that method again. Tried that again. Next one sold a little better. Next one sold a little bit better. And then, I believe that you persist until you succeed. And sometimes your destiny finds you. Those two go together, right? Destiny is attracted to people who persist. So I came up with I was really pissed off because I'd written this book that I couldn't give away for free. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to sell it to people. I mean, really, I was mad, Joe. I sat down in 2 or 3 hours. I wrote out a letter. I'm like, I'm going to force people to buy this book because this is a great book. Sit down. I wrote it out. Dear friend, if you want to sell products by the hundreds or even the thousands, listen up. This might be the most important letter you'll ever read. Now, I know there's a lot of people teaching stuff about internet marketing, but let me give you 5 reasons to believe me. Another one, my best client, is worth $600 million. He pays me up to $10,000 to write a letter. Boom, 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 boom. And the headline said, discover the amazing form that sells products like crazy. Guarantee your products sell like crazy or triple your money back, which at the time, hardly anybody had ever done a crazy guarantee like that. And then a friend of mine had a speaking gig named Rick Benito, wrote The Mirror Easy, and he had a speaking gig over in Kauai, and he couldn't make it. He's like, hey, Marlon, you want to go to a speaking gig over in Kauai? And I'm like, sure, I'll tell you what I got. I just wrote this ebook. Why don't you just sell this? Because I really appreciate it. And I'll give you 80% commissions. He's like, well, could I give other people a commission on it? And then, like it's informal 2-level. I'm like, sure. I come back from Kauai. The thing is just exploded. Right. So sometimes you find your destiny, Joe. Sometimes your destiny finds you. And I remember you mentioned one book, but you've had more than one book that exploded when you honestly didn't expect it, because I think your destiny found you.
Well, that's true. I've got several stories of my own, but I want to make sure that I give you the time to talk about some of these things. One of the things that you just said is you gave Rick, I think that was his name, an 80% commission. Why would you give 80%? And I'm being the advocate for my viewers right now, because surely they're wondering, why didn't he just give them 10%? Why is he giving them 80% of the sale? Why 80%?
Well, nowadays people will give 100% actually. And in fact, I have a friend named Michael who recently gave 300% commissions on his front end. And the reason is, he has a phone team, and they do a webinar, and then people apply for his coaching program. And then the salesperson talks to him on the phone, and I don't know how much it is. It's probably at least $5,000, right? Now, in those days, I'm a fan of simplicity, Dr. Joe. So today people teach a lot of complex things. I always believe in keeping it simple, and I know you do also, because simple is actionable. So what they call today a marketing funnel. My marketing funnel was, I'd heard the money was in the back end, the repeat business, the follow-up. I'm like, well, I need a back end. And I had these products that didn't sell so well. I'm just going to bundle all of them up and sell those for $500. So the whole marketing system was $67 front end book, back end $500. So they bought the $67 product and were like, hey, you're going to save $100 if you buy this in the next 30 days. It's 30-day deadline, right? So like hotcakes, right? So like hotcakes. So that was the whole, it was nothing complicated. It's just, I think I learned that from Jay Abraham, front end, back end. I can't take credit for that, but I think all great marketing is simple, Joe, like karmic marketing.
Right.
right? That's yeah, there you go. Now
My
we're
latest book,
talking.
ladies and gentlemen, Karmic Marketing.
And I have right here an example that Dr. Joe lives what he teaches. In the mastermind, he went, now this is the original retro first edition of The Science of Getting Rich by Dr. Waddles.
Yeah,
And
Wallace
at our
Waddles.
mastermind, Joe gave each one of us this book. And I'll tell you this, if you meet Dr. Joe Vitale, he doesn't show up empty-handed because he believes in karmic marketing, right?
Thank you. Well, I guess that ties into the story you were kind of teasing me into saying. I wrote a book called Spiritual Marketing way back in the 1990s. And it was a little pamphlet that I wrote from my sister because she was struggling. She was on welfare. She was trying to raise kids. And I felt for her. We were 2,000 miles apart, but I had left homelessness. I had left poverty, and I was starting to do fairly well. And I thought, I'm going to write this little booklet. And I called it Spiritual Marketing because there was a little spirituality in it, a little marketing in it. And I thought it was an unusual title. I was thinking as a copywriter. I wrote it for her. I gave it to her. I just stapled a printed out copy of it, gave it to her. She read it, she applied it, she got off welfare, she made some difference. Then I started giving the book away to people when I felt just inclined to do it. I had a couple copies. I went to Kinko's, which was the print store back then, and made a few and hand them out. Then Bob Proctor, who made a seminar out of the book you just held up, The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Waddles. Bob Proctor turned that into an enterprise, and he traveled around doing entire weekend seminars just commenting on the book. I gave my not published book to Bob Proctor, Spiritual Marketing. He loved it. He stood on stage in front of almost 300 people and said, "Hey, Dr. Joe Vitale's in the room. He just wrote this book. You're all going to want it." And I panicked. I didn't have the book. It wasn't published. I never intended to publish it. I actually feared that people would ridicule me for being spiritual when I was coming out as a kind of a marketing internet copywriter kind of a guy. But a publisher was there. It was a print on demand publisher, which meant they would set it up as a kind of a bakery, which is still around today, but it was new then. And when people would order Spiritual Marketing, it would be printed for them and it would be sold to them, and it would be delivered to them. Spiritual Marketing ended up being an Amazon bestseller. I didn't even try. It was word of mouth. That book was also written about by the New York Times because the New York Times was doing an article on print on demand. That book was noticed.
Wow.
I was noticed. Then a publisher in New Jersey, the same publisher who published Moby Dick in the 1800s for Herman Melville, Jay Wiley, they called me up and they said, "We see you have this book, Spiritual Marketing." And I said, "Yeah, I've been giving it away. I give it away online, and we estimate millions of people actually got it, which is karmic marketing. I gave it away without any thought of return. I just wanted to help." They said, "We want to buy your book. We want to publish your book, but we don't like the title." And I actually was in a mastermind, went in it. We brainstormed the new title. The new title was The Attractor Factor. The Attractor Factor has been my #1 self-help book bestseller, still is today. The story doesn't stop there. It was that book that was handed to a woman in Australia, and she was a movie director and TV show director. And she called me and said, "I want to make a movie about the law of attraction. I read your book, formerly Spiritual Marketing. Now it's The Attractor Factor, and I want you to be in my movie." And I almost said no, but I also thought, well, she's probably crazy. I hear from people with wild ideas and they never call back. She called back, and that movie was The Secret, which exploded me into orbit. They know me on Mars now and other planets because of my appearance in the movie The Secret. But stop and trace this back. This is a lesson for everybody watching. The movie The Secret, I got in because of a book. The book was The Attractor Factor. Before that, it was Spiritual Marketing. Before that, it was a freebie. I gave it away. And practicing good karmic marketing, I attribute a whole lot of my giving to my receiving by being in that movie, which of course has led me to being all over the planet and to book deals and other deals that I never foresaw. So Marlon, thanks for kind of queuing me up for that. I wasn't expecting to tell that whole story.
No, but
it's
that
an
is, I never
important
heard the
story.
full story. That is the best story. I'd only heard the last part where that's how you had gotten to be on The Secret. I hadn't heard the rest of it about Bob Proctor and everything.
Yeah.
That is just classic. And you know, Dr. Joe, I think it comes back to that, to sometimes your destiny finds you, number one, but beyond that, like, this is what a lot of people don't do. They just don't take the next step.
Yes.
They're like,
oh, yes.
they want to be a bestseller. They're
Yeah.
like, well, I want to be like Dr. Joe. I want to be in The Secret. But it's like they never self-publish the ebook.
Right. Right.
Right. So it's like God gives you guidance. The universe gives you guidance. But a lot of times that guidance is just the next step. And it's just like, are you going to take the next step or aren't you? If you take that next step, then the universe will show you the next step.
So what I'd like you to do, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but I also know from my personal experience with you is that you are so informed, educated, and experienced on so many levels when it comes to making money online. And we've got some newbies that are watching this right now, and maybe we're getting them excited. Maybe they're going, oh, that's cool. I want to do something like that, but I don't know what. Where would you advise them to start? We were talking about purpose. We were talking about passion. We were talking about writing down goals. But if there was something in the short time we have, and I'll give people the link to go find out more about you, but in the short time we have, what would you think is the most important thing for them to just get up and do right now to move in the direction of possibly making a living online or making some money online?
You know, I grew up in Oklahoma City, Dr. Joe, and in Tulsa, Oklahoma, there's a very famous evangelist named Oral Roberts. He has a book I have over here on my shelf called Seed Faith. And in Seed Faith, it was like 3 steps, right? And it was based on farmers. And in Tulsa, Oklahoma, you have a lot of farmers, or you did in the old days, and they understood seeds and the law of sowing and reaping. My client worth $600 million, Walter Haley, he passed on, but when he was living, he said, that you sow what you reap. And he always talked about that you got to be sowing, you got to be sowing, you got to be sowing. So I created a thing that is called seed marketing. And it's find the need, sow the seed, reap the harvest, right?
Find the need,
sow the seed, reap the harvest. So step 1 is very simple. Just find the needs, find wants. What are the needs with your superpower or whatever talents that you understand God has given you, whatever abilities you understand? Usually they're unique abilities. Usually God has put something unique within you. You find the needs that you can serve with your unique abilities and the wants. Step 2 is you sow the seeds. Now, today, the easiest way to do that is with social media. It is so incredible. When you if you post regularly on social media, you do a weekly YouTube video, you post on Instagram, it's very, 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 very powerful. People underestimate the power of it. And you get people on your email list from doing that by giving away freebies, karmic marketing, right? And then step 3 is the fun part, the part we all love, reap the harvest. That's where you make an offer to your list and they buy. You always hear, well, you know, you can make money in 15 minutes. You can make money while you sleep overnight. You make money probably every day while you sleep. I made good money last night while I woke up like, oh, this is great. I got money, right? But the reason is because you got a list.
Yeah.
Right. You send an email to your list, money comes in. It's the simplest thing. So it's a real simple 3-step thing. Find the need that matches your superpower, your gifts, sow the seeds, reap the harvest.
And I looked at your marlonsanders.com website today, and I saw that you have an ebook that's free that's called Seed Marketing. So is that what you're referring to?
The Miracle of Seed Marketing. Yes, it is a free ebook. And if people will take that and read it, Joe, they'll be turned on to something simple that they can actually do.
I love it. So go to marlonsanders.com and you'll see it there, The Miracle of Seed Marketing. Download it and read it. Now, there's one comment you said earlier, and I want to clarify something because there may be people watching this and talking themselves out of doing anything because they think they can't learn or they don't know or they don't have a superpower. You mentioned that I am a copywriter and am known as a copywriter, and maybe writing came easy to me. And what I want to point out is it did not. I
Really?
did not get born with a typewriter in my diapers. I did not have a pen or a quill or anything like that. I remember putting myself through a very intense self-study program. And it's important that I say this because I was a horrible student in school. I sat, they had the slow row. That was the row over on the far left, and there were 2 or 3 people over there, and they all had some sort of handicap. They put me in that row. I was in that row. But if you left but if you left me alone with books, oh, I would devour books, and I would devour what I was interested in. And because I was reading so many books and finally concluded, well, maybe I could write books, I started reading books on how to write. And I would go to the library. I was fortunate to be in a very nice library in Niles, Ohio, the Niles McKinley Library. And I'd sit there with writing books and yellow paper, and I would have my pencil, and I would do their exercises. I did them because I was training myself to be a writer.
Wow.
Now, that's just to be an article writer. When I discovered that Robert Collier had been a copywriter, I didn't even know what a copywriter was. I didn't know the name. Robert Collier had been a metaphysical writer. He wrote books I read when I was a kid that were the Secret of the Ages kind of books and prayer works kind of books and things like that. He turns out to have been a genius copywriter. I read the Robert Collier letter book, changed my life forever. I was a hypnotic writer after I read that book because I devoured it and I applied it. So what I'm saying to everybody watching is you may feel like, well, I can't write copy. I learned from Gary Halbert, just like a lot of people, and probably Marlon. I bought his little books. They were only 20 or 30 pages long, Maximum Money from Minimum Time, something like that, and some other books. That awoke in me the ability to write in a conversational and charming way and be willing to do things that Marlon did and I didn't, like put up an elephant's butt and say, I'll kiss it if you're not happy with my product. Whole point is, I taught myself. We can learn so much. I saw a brief interview with Brad Pitt the other day, and they were mentioning that he can learn different things, or he does learn different things because he's in so many different movies, playing so many different parts. And he made the comment, he says, that's one of the perks. You learn a new skill in every movie. Well, if he can learn, if I can learn, if Marlon can learn, if everybody in the world can pick up this new skill, and we have the time to do it because of the pandemic, we're all kind of still in a lockdown, and we have YouTube and Google and everything else, then you can do it too. Marlon, do you agree?
Dr. Joe, I want to add to that something people don't know.
Well,
when you told me this, I'm pretty sure my jaw dropped for 60 seconds. Tell people how many fingers you type with.
Yes, that's a great story because I've been talking to Mark Joyner. I was with Mark Joyner, who's another internet legend from the early days, a pioneer. It was around 2005. And he had a new laptop and he turned it around and said, go ahead, type on it. And I got my 2 fingers and I started typing. And his jaw dropped and he said, no, type normally. And I went, this is normally. I type 2 fingers. And he said, you only use 2 fingers? I said, that's all I need. He said, if you learn to use all 10, how much more would you do? And I said, I've written 80 books. How many more do I have to write with all my fingers? I only use 2. That's all I need. The rest get to, hold up a drink or something. And so, again, a lot of the things that we think we need to know in order to achieve something are not true. You can be true to yourself. You can learn within whatever is possible for you to do and achieve great things.
I wrote 80 books and became famous around the world typing with only 2 fingers. It's a great book, Dr. Joe. But nobody knows that. Right, and the proof is it's burning desire. If you have the burning desire, when my dad was in the 1st grade, he wanted a mechanical pencil more than anything in the world, and they were horribly poor, and he could not afford a mechanical pencil. A kid threw a mechanical pencil away. He took that pencil and he fixed it, and he traded it for 2 more that didn't work. He fixed those 2 more and he traded it for 4 more that didn't work. Pretty soon he had 300 mechanical pencils. One day a kid came to school with a wooden box, cherry wood wooden box, which I have in my room. And he wanted that box more than anything in the world. He traded 300 mechanical pencils for that cherry wood box. The only thing that I really have from my dad is a cherry wood box that he got because he had a burning desire to have a mechanical pencil. And I believe that if you believe and you have a burning desire and you have persistence and you have definiteness of purpose and you do the things that Dr. Joe teaches about removing barriers and everything and about this no limit thinking, I believe we don't know what our limits are.
Yes, I agree. Oh, thank you for saying that, Marlon, because I've been walking around saying, I don't really think we have any limits. I think all the limits that we agree on are mental constructs, and we reinforce them by continuing to look at them and talk about them. I think even science has been put up as the new religion, but science never comes to a conclusion. Science comes to current findings, and then they change their mind when there's another scientific study. So I don't know that there's actually any limits. And I think there's real power when we start to assume that there are not, or at least question what we think are limits. Now, I wanted to ask you, because I know you're a well-read man, that Think and Grow Rich obviously is a book everybody should read. And that one big client of yours read it every year. And I've known people who have read it 50, 60 times. And I reread it for the movie I was being filmed in. And the book came out in the 1930s, but yet it's still relevant. There's some dated stories in it, but it's still relevant. Besides that book, what other books have influenced you to think bigger, to act more boldly, to achieve some success, whatever they may be, because they may be new to other people?
Well, it's a great question. Yeah, I have something around 4,000 books here. Those are fake books behind me, because the real bookshelf behind it is a freaking mess, because it's a bookshelf I use, not one that's for show, right? This book is just it's just a tremendous book.
That was The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace
The Science
Waddles.
of Getting Rich. It's one of the great books to start with. Now, I have all the Napoleon Hill books, as I'm sure you do. And I read The Law of Success, which is his giant one. I've read that probably at least 3 times.
Wow.
Very well. I read fast. So, I could take 30 and 40. I would do this many times, buy 30 or 40 books at the bookstore, go to the coffee shop, and in like 4 hours, I've read all of them, more or less, right? But it's just a tremendous book. I'll tell you a fascinating book I discovered recently that I know you know her, but I don't know if you read her book. And I hate to say it because I don't like profanity whatsoever, but the book was by Amanda Francis about how to be as rich as the F word.
Yes.
And let me tell you what I learned from that, Dr. Joe, was she's talking about this no limits thinking, this expansive thinking, right? And she's saying, you know what? A lot of you are afraid for being bigger. You're afraid of being bigger. You're afraid of more exposure. You're afraid to have exposure. You're afraid to have visibility. And I realized wow, that is, at a certain level, like she's like, think a lot bigger. And do you feel comfortable with it?
I did read the book, and I do love the book, and I've now corresponded with her. I still haven't met her. And one of the things I loved about the book was the energy in it. There was an energetic vibe that was convincing. It was without doubt. It was rollicking. It was just a high vibe kind of an energy. And I just felt like that's what each of us needs to have. Now, I got it from reading her book, and I generally have it, but I think it's the high vibration that the law of attraction people talk about, that the movie The Secret talked about. But even if you forget all the possible metaphysical woo-woo stuff, science talks about being happier by activating different parts of your brain and the chemicals that are in your brain. And you do that by some things, apparently for you and me, by reading joyful, uplifting books. And the one by Amanda is one of those. What else comes to mind?
I'll tell you a book. Again, I go back to Napoleon Hill, but I have a lot of others I can talk about. But the thing about Napoleon Hill is if you're really down, if you're really, really down, read his book, You Can Work Your Own Miracles. It's a very gut level, but if you are down, you need to read that book. Now, I have a book that's one that helps me be stronger, and it's the book by Jim Lohr, I believe it's Lohr, called Score, which is a book about, he's actually teaches this to athletes about the attitudes that help you be a high achiever. and he works with some very high level athletes. And it's also though about recovery, right? And about how that you need to have an optimism, and you need to have the highest achievement is accomplished when you have a little bit of a lighthearted attitude, when you keep your sense of humor, right? And he talks about though that rest and recuperation are essential for accomplishment. That it's not such a big thinking book, but it's a very practical book about being a higher achiever, right? I love the book called "To Love Is to Be Happy With" by Barry Neil Kaufman. Again,
I love Barry Neil. Barry Neil Kaufman. I knew him. I studied with him in 1985.
No way.
I was broke, but I was so enthralled by "To Love Is to Be Happy With." It's the option method.
I went to his institute in person.
I went to his institute. Yes.
Dude, you're kidding. I did not know that.
I did. I met Ron. I met
Phenomenal.
Susie. He would, I'm assuming he's still around. I don't know. I haven't checked in. We're running out of time, Marlon. We can talk for a very long time. There's so much to say. Your energy is so high. I feel so alive and electric. I hope everybody else does. Do you want them to go to marlonsanders.com, or where is the right place?
marlonsanders.com and get the Miracle of Seed Marketing. It's just a great place to start, Dr. Joe. And I want people to know, I just want them to know that you're real, because I don't think people see you, the celebrity, Dr. Joe Vitale, but they don't know that you live on you're not born with a silver spoon in your mouth. You live these things that you teach, and you really do practice thinking big about things. Where you have any idea how you're going to accomplish it, you put it out there. I want a best-selling album, a music album. I want a speaking gig in such and so country, and you put it out there verbally, and when you don't even know how you're going to get it, you just put it out to the universe. And people don't know this, and I don't believe people do this, Dr. Joe. And I think a book just about that you do, about how you think so big and you put these things out to the universe, it's a tremendous thing.
Thank you, Marlon. You touched me. You are an amazing person, an amazing friend, and I will be forever grateful. I can't wait to see you again in person.
All right. Thanks for having me on, everyone.
Of course. I want to talk to my list here, my viewers, for a moment. There's a couple of things that Marlon demonstrated, and I also demonstrated, that I want to make sure you grasp. We're still learning. He just mentioned 2 or 3 books that he was reading now. The man doesn't have to keep reading books. Most people stop reading books after they leave high school. They might have read 1 book since high school. I'm reading books virtually every day. Apparently Marlon is as well. I'm still growing. I'm still reaching. There's still more for me to accomplish, more for me to know, more for me to tweak and refine in my own life. Apparently Marlon's doing the very same thing. In order to go in the direction of the title of this TV show, Zero Limits Living, you need to question what you think are beliefs. You need to question what you think is current reality, because a lot of what you're taking as being the prison that you might perceive you're in is actually invisible, is actually a perception. And once you change the perception, you are free. You are free to create a life. And I don't care if there's a pandemic. I don't care if there's a disease, a COVID, whatever it happens to be out there. You can create a kind of immune system for it. In a way, I'm talking about metaphysics, I'm talking about psychology, but I'm also being a very spiritually practical person here. I'm a guy who believes in miracles. I usually sign off saying, expect miracles. That's the new tagline I want all of you to have. I think expect miracles is somewhere on one of the bookshelves behind me, as well as the phrase, be happy. So I want to thank you for listening to Zero Limits or watching Zero Limits Living. I want to remind you that this show airs every Friday. It's on Apple TV. It's on Roku. It's on Amazon Fire. It is on the Lux TV app. It is on YouTube. We're going to saturate the world with good news. And I want to thank Candace Barr, who is sponsoring this, and luxemediastudios for hosting this, and for Chris for being the wizard behind the camera. Thank you for being here. Have a great week. See you next week. I'm going to inspire you, inform you, and set a fire under you. Dr. Joe Vitale, over and out.
Glutathione is a big word. It's the body's own master antioxidant. It's a scavenger for free radical, bacteria, and viruses. There are no products in the market with the ingredient NASET. NASET increases the production of glutathione that's in our body already to strengthen and enhance our immune system, elevate sense of well-being, support muscle strength and endurance, cognitive function, and liver support. It helps with increased energy and blood sugar regulation. Get your bottle of GSH Plus from www.salvationnutra.com.